you have 1 minute to talk. We're live? Okay, may I get everyone's attention, please?
I have...
So we want to welcome you to join us on this incredible occasion, this wonderful evening that we are proud to sponsor. My name is Robert Levine. I'm from Integral Yoga, and Integral Yoga is so thrilled to have you all here. And I'm thrilled to be here because I've had the great pleasure to know and work with these amazing, talented, visionary people. So we're going to have an amazing 2 hours where we're going to explore and learn and develop and find ways in which we could take the natural capacities that we have, that we've all generate and all explore on a regular daily basis and have a shared experience to take this forward. And as part of this evening, we are really thrilled to have Jude Currivan, who is, and my memory's not that good, so I'm going to read it, who is the author of The Cosmic Hologram, which is an incredible book. If you haven't bought it or read it, just buy it. You can even put it under your pillow and feel the vibrations from her book. And she's the co-creator of the WholeWorld-View. We also have my dear friend Rick Ulfik. Rick is a founder of We the World and the We campaign at we.net. He's also been a nonviolent coordinator working with a nonviolent communication workshop. He's a facilitator and a leader within the New York Center. We're also very excited to have Kurt Johnson, who's an amazing voice, an amazing person. It's always great just to be around him. And Kurt is the author of The Coming Interspiritual Age. He is president of Friends of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, of which myself, Rick, and also Kristin is on the board. And Mitchell, we don't want to forget Mitchell. Michelle and Troy, and Kay is here someplace. So the FION's board is about half this room. And then, of course, we are always, yes, we do. That's why I'm excited to be here. And, of course, we have the wonderful spirit, wonderful voice, wonderful talent. We have Kristin Hoffmann. And Kristin, as we all know, is an internationally acclaimed singer and songwriter. And it's just amazing to be in her presence, even when she's just sitting there, and even more so when she's singing. Also, this evening, we have Gil Agnew. And Gil is a co-creator of the WholeWorld-View along with Jude. So we really want to get this evening started. So if the schedule is correct, Rick actually made up all of these signs so that I could tell people when they just have a few minutes to go. So we're going to start this off, and we're going to have Kristin is going to perform for us.
Okay. It's such an honor to perform this first song called Universal, which I wrote for the beautiful release of Jude's book last year, The Cosmic Hologram. And it was so fun to dive in to the Cosmic Hologram and think of how to bring the main messages through in a musical experience. And I had to read every page of Jude's book about 3 times for my brain and my body to assimilate what she was talking about. And I was thinking, how is this going to happen musically? But eventually, I had this aha spirit moment where it just started coming, and I sat down at the piano, and Universal was birthed. Here we go. There is a song that we all know as we all play parts in this universal, note by note and bit by bit, our symphony of consciousness. Have we forgotten harmony is holographic and complete? Fear by fear we've been making choices, hearing the dissonance of our voices. Believe and you will see. Into greatness calls our being. Feel the information rearranging for our worldview healing. Sing in unity. Time is the universal thought. Space is the breath of who we are. Co-creators in the music. Our awareness is the tuning. Just as ones and zeros speak the language of technology, we are the manifested glory of our information story. Believe and you will see. Into greatness calls our being. Feel the information rearranging for our worldview healing. Sing in unity. Cosmic hologram, hold it in your hand. You are one with all, like a shining gem on the strings. Our godly instrument playing out our universal. Believe and you will see. Into greatness calls our being. Feel the information rearranging for our worldview healing. Believe in our being. Feel the information rearranging for our worldview healing. Sing in unity. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, can we do that? Okay, is. Okay. Oh, Kristin, bless you, thank you. I was so honoured when Kristin offered to write a theme song for the Cosmic Hologram. And the publisher said in 40 years he'd never known a theme song for a book. So I was unbelievably honoured, but what I feel is that your song really gives embodiment to the message of the Cosmic Hologram. And, you know, I describe our universe as a universe soul. And that, as many mystics through the ages have said, but leading edge science is only just coming to stand alongside with those insights of our universe not being a great thing, but a great thought. And the reason why, if you'd like to, you know, just put the book under your pillow rather than read it, is I had to do a deep dive into science, the leading edge of science, across all scales of existence and many fields of research, to really bring the evidence that is coming forward now to reveal this deep truth. And I could have written a really fluffy book, you know. In fact, the first part of the book is how to create a perfect universe, and it was based on my mother's chocolate cake recipe. So, I mean, you know, it sort of was that. But I realised that if the book was going to change the dial in any way, which was my aim, then I had to provide the evidence. And that took a deep dive, and it took a book that is, if you don't have the scientific background, isn't the easiest book in the world. But I literally have had people write to me and say, I have no science. But last night I did put the book under my pillow, and it dreamed me in the night. And I woke up in the morning and I knew this, and I knew I was embodying the cosmic hologram. So it really is, I mean, it sounds fun, but I mean, it really is. It speaks on, it seems to speak at different levels to people. And a lot of what we're trying to do is to use its message as a seed point for transformational change. So what we did last year at the UN in May, Kristin premiered Universe Soul, and we launched the book at the UN Chapel. And then in July, we launched the book at the House of Lords in London. And given that I'm a daughter of a coal miner, walking to the House of Lords and doing this was a big deal, actually. And we played Universe Soul there as well. But the thing of the book is that science has told us that the world is separate, made up of separate things, and that consciousness is something that just comes along at the end of accidental biological or accidental evolutionary processes, and that this world, the physical realm, is the only reality. And this material reductionism, this scientific mainstream, has pervaded all that we do. It's really formed the basis of our collective perspectives of what is reality. And so our beliefs drive our behaviours. So if we believe the world is separate and just materialistic and really meaningless, then we act as if. And that has brought us really to this edge of breakdown, because our separated, fragmented perspectives have driven our dysfunctional behaviours. So even though with initiatives such as the Sustainable Development Goals coming along, they are, however wonderful they are, and my goodness me, what an achievement, they're still responses to our dysfunctional behaviours. And so however hard we try, I also know as a healer as well as a cosmologist, that unless we heal a dis-ease, it will find other ways of manifesting. So the Cosmic Hologram is the first of a trilogy of books whose service is to try and help us understand how we can heal our worldview by revealing, and this is where the leading edge scientific evidence, it's not theory, it's not ideas, it's evidence, is showing that instead of our universe beginning in a sort of accidental big bang, it wasn't big and it wasn't a bang, because bangs, you know, suggest explosion and chaos. It began as the first moment of a big breath, an out breath. It also, the evidence is showing that our universe exists and evolves as a unified entity, and that all that we call physical reality emerges from deeper realms, deeper non-physical realms of information, not random data, but dynamic, informational relationships that ultimately play out in all the incredibly complex phenomena of the physical realm. But also it's showing that our universe, at that first moment of the big breath, the laws of physics, instead of being arbitrary, are incredibly perfectly balanced and again relational in such a way that they enable our universe not to just to exist but to evolve. So one of the things I've done with the book is restate the two laws, the foundational laws of thermodynamics, as two laws of information. And Einstein always said the universe is as simple as it can be, but no simpler. So I've always thought, we have two laws of thermodynamics. Why do we have two laws and not one law? And the reality is we need those two laws to explain how the universe exists and how it evolves. And not only that, but by restating the laws of physics, not in terms of energy and matter and space and time, but a more foundational level of information expressed as energy and matter and expressed in a complementary way of space-time. Voila! The How to Make a Perfect Universe as a chocolate cake just literally does that. Along the way, quite amazingly, it enables quantum physics and relativity theory to be reconciled. Essentially, what happens is this. Our universe began 13.8 billion years ago. Tiny, but not in a big bang as the first moment of a big breath. Not infinitely tiny, but finitely tiny. We also now know from cosmology that our universe isn't infinite, it is finite, and it's what's called a closed system. Now that's really important because it means that it can exist and evolve as a unified entity, and where the laws of physics are universal, so they don't change through space and they don't change through time. In a galaxy far, far away and a long, long time ago, I've heard that somewhere, same universal laws of physics apply. But the point is they are literally as simple as they can be, but no simpler. So our universe soul, began as a baby universe. And just as a baby human is born with all the DNA that they'll have throughout their life, so our universe was born with the balance of energy and matter that is conserved throughout its life. That's the first law. You know, that an energy and energy matter, a closed system, is always conserved. So it changes, but it's always ultimately totals the same. And so when we restate that first law, because we now know experimentally again, this isn't ideas, this isn't theory, although it applies with theory, it's the evidence over the last few years show that information, the same digitized ones and zeros of the information that flows through our technologies, is exactly the same as the universal information that underpins all that we call physical reality. So that first law, when it's restated in informational terms, says that information expressed as energy and matter of our entire universe is always conserved, from the first moment of creation through to the last moment of the big breath. Yeah? That's great because it enables our universe to exist. And it's lovely because it's a very simple statement of quantum physics. The trouble is, of itself, it isn't enough because quantum physics has no notion of time. Energy and matter doesn't care whether time goes forward or time goes backwards. It really does not care. And if you talk to most quantum physicists, they don't care either. But we care because we live in a universe where there is a flow of time through space-time. And that's where the second law comes in. Because the second law says that the entropy of a closed system always increases through time. Now, when we add the cosmology of a finite and closed universe, when we equate space with time, which is what relativity does, then what that says is the entropy of our universe always increases through space-time from its beginning, 13.8 billion years ago. Now, entropy is a funny old thing and is full of people misunderstanding what entropy is about. And most people think of entropy as order to disorder, yeah? Yeah, fair point? And if any of you here, who's a parent in this room? You know all about entropy. You know all about entropy. Your kid's bedroom is a perfect example of entropy. Order to disorder, always. But that really is there's a misunderstanding there, because when a gentleman called Ludwig Boltzmann studied gases 150 years ago and came up with these two laws of thermodynamics, instead of order to disorder, he talked about the number of microstates of a system. That's its entropy. Okay? So if you have, for example, a pack of cards and you take them out of their polythene wrapper, they're at their lowest entropy at that point. If you then throw them up in the air and they land all over the place, their entropy increases. And if you were to run a video of doing that, you'd always know which way time flowed, because you'd always see them go from that just taken out the polythene wrapper at their lowest entropy to then throwing them up in the air where their entropy would increase. But it isn't order to disorder. It's simplicity to complexity. Because if you think about it, they're their simplest relational form when you take them out of the wrapper. When you throw them up in the air, they're all over the place. We might say it's disorder, but actually it's complexity. Now, over more recent years, we've realized that a better way of describing entropy instead of microstates is the informational content of a system. So the informational content of a system, whether it's a pack of cards or whatever it may be, will always increase through space-time. So if we go back to that first moment again, at that first moment of space-time, our universe soul, our baby universe soul, had all the information expressed as energy matter that it would ever need and use and conserve, but it was its lowest informational content, just like a baby. No experience, no knowing, no learning yet. So its informational entropy was at its lowest, and that's its informational content was at its lowest. And every moment since that first moment, 13.8 billion years ago, the informational content of the space-time of our universe has increased. There was less informational content in our universe yesterday than there is today, than there will be tomorrow. So it's like a human being being born and then learning and experiencing and growing. Now what that does, and that's the second law restated, which is why you need the two laws, this relates to space-time and therefore relates to relativity. But what it does do, it enables our universe to evolve. And that's why you need the two laws and the complementary way in which information expresses itself as energy, matter, and space-time. Otherwise, we would not have a universe that could both exist, but more importantly, evolve. Because it didn't evolve, we would not be here. Because 13.8 billion years ago, that simplest moment, all that was there really was hydrogen. And since then, these wonderful instructions have enabled our universe to get it from simplicity to complexity. But of course, the more foundational realization is that mind and consciousness isn't something we have. It's what we and the whole world are. Because our universe and universes emerge from the infinity and eternity of cosmic mind as finite thought forms as finite universe souls that have this life cycle, just as we have a life cycle. And just as the intelligence of our universe has continued to develop, to evolve, then we here in this moment are microcosmic co-creators of that intelligence and that evolutionary impulse. We have meaning, we have purpose. Everything that manifests in our universe from its first moment through its life cycle to when at the end of its days its awareness will be released back into the cosmic plenum of cosmic mind has meaning and purpose. And that turns the prevailing scientific paradigm completely on its head. But it's far more than a scientific revolution. It's a revolution in consciousness. And with the evidence, we've hoped for this. You know, spiritual traditions have told us this for millennia. You know, Kurt is an absolute walking encyclopedia of this awareness and this interspiritual, because it is universal spiritual understanding. But science has just said, no. Keep with your faith-based stuff, but please, you know, get real. It's science that's been inadequate, and it's science that's finally catching up with spiritual perspectives and integrating with spiritual perspectives. And in that integration, we have the opportunity perhaps for this to be a game changer, because we can actually, with this message, not just the book under your pillow, but beautiful creative expressions of what this is about as part of a revolutionary support to help heal our worldview and so heal our behaviors. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you, and I'm so glad to know another way of looking at entropy. I had to write that down. But you have to have kids to.
Or you could be just messy yourself.
Don't worry, I've got plenty of entropy in my room. But before I forget, I wanted to mention one of the things that I learned reading some science. It's been part of my interest. Isaac Asimov's definition of life. And I think this applies. Life is that which reverses entropy. Or at least that's...
That really is a mistaken perspective. Because that thing of order, disorder, got us into this sort of cul-de-sac of syntropy and negentropy. And if you go beyond that misunderstanding, you get to this entropy as informational content. And then it's about coherence and decoherence, right. But it's not about reversing entropy. It's actually moving through a process.
Right. So it's more about creating complexity. It sounds like, which is a nice. But all through that continuation of the flow of time. You know, when we come to the end of our physical lives, you know, we're a very coherent biological template through our lifetimes. And of course, time is moving on, we're moving on, informational content of our universe is moving on. When we come to the end of our lives and our consciousness moves to another level of awareness, our bodies remain, and our bodies get composted, essentially. But the entropy, the informational content of that continuing process continues to increase. Essentially, informational entropy. Entropy is the physics of evolution. Yeah?
It sounds like it's a prerequisite for life. It's a beautiful model that you presented to us.
Absolutely, thank you, yes. But when you see it in that way, you're seeing it as, you know, this informational content, this whole evolutionary impulse this simplicity to complexity, but complexity in that general process still has the sort of the ebbs and the flows of coherence, decoherence, coherence. Yeah.
So, my kind of part of this, what we're doing today. I'm Rick Ulfik, founder of We the World and the We campaign at we.net, and the idea of unity consciousness is something that, in a sense, we, with my organization, We the World, is promoting, kind of bringing it sort of on the ground, because we've been kind of traveling through the cosmos in the cosmic hologram. So what we're doing is, I guess, through our programs like 11 Days of Global Unity, the We campaign in general, we are working to spark a cultural shift, kind of away from the idea of separation, and also away from power over thinking and attitudes and policies, right? Because, of course, that kind of is based on this idea of separation in a sense, right? So Rian Eisler calls this domination culture, this power over kind of way of thinking about things. And what we're working to create the shift towards is more like power with thinking. And Rian Eisler calls that partnership culture. So I guess the idea is that in this kind of us versus them environment, with that kind of mentality, where we regularly hear things. Do you want that? So we're constantly hearing about the us versus them kind of thing, especially nowadays where people are talking about the culture wars and extreme political polarization, right? So what I'm happy about is that there are a growing number of people who are saying that people and humanity shares much more in common than what divides people. And the idea of nonviolent communication, which is what I'm going to get into in much more detail tonight, nonviolent communication actually has a way of cataloging all of the kind of universal values that all people share. And it's really amazing because, in fact, I'm going to share with you, I actually printed out something which I'm going to share with people here, and then later, oh, thank you. Yeah, here, you could just take all of them and give me the rest. So I'll take one. So on the top sheet of what I'm giving out, it actually catalogs all of the needs that human beings share. And the amazing thing is that we're talking about not just physical needs, because everybody can imagine that, everybody needs air and water and food and shelter and those kinds of physical needs. But there are also psychological needs. And it's amazing when you take a look at these, at the sheets that you're going to be receiving. The psychological needs we all share are things like love, respect, integrity, meaning, and dignity, security, that kind of thing. But there are actually about 100 of them. And the incredible thing is that these needs have been checked in cultures around the world. So there are different ethnic groups, cultural groups, religions, all of them have these needs. And I guess what's happening is that when people's needs are not met, that kind of results in emotions, right? Feelings. And so if you flip the sheet over from the needs part to the other side, the feelings, you can see like the top section, when people's needs are met, you can see those feelings are listed there. And then when they're not met, the bottom section is there. And what I've discovered is that there are three really crucial and pivotal aspects of these universal needs that we all share. And one of them is, I started mentioning before, that they are universally shared across cultures. So that means every person on the planet, a person, it could be a teenager in a gang, or your grandmother, or the Dalai Lama, and even politicians share these universal needs. I know it's hard to believe sometimes. So, for me, that means that the clash, this idea of a clash of civilizations, that idea can dissolve, because underneath it all, we're all doing whatever our actions are to meet needs that we all share. So another aspect is that everything that people do in life is to meet these needs. So that can help to dissolve like frames and labels that we may put on people. Like, he's a bad person, she's an evil person, or something like that. Because if you begin to think that they are doing what we're all doing to meet needs, that can be very helpful with that. And then the third thing is, and maybe this is the most powerful, these needs can never come into conflict. What can come into conflict are the strategies to meet needs. So people create all kinds of strategies to meet their needs, and the strategies can easily come into conflict. But if we understand what people's needs are, then people we're in conflict with, we can begin to open up a dialogue and a channel for communication that can allow people to have the kind of understanding to begin to co-create new strategies that can meet both sides that are in some kind of conflict. And this is a very powerful thing, and it leads me to feel that nonviolent communication has the potential to help us move into a culture of peace. So that's a very powerful thing. And before I finish, I want to put an idea in your head, because we're going to do a little experiential exercise or process later. And so, if you don't mind, think of something that somebody said to you, might be recently or might be in the past, that you didn't like hearing. Just begin to think of that as we go into the next section, Q&A and all that, because we're going to work with that later in our experience and see if it might be possible to shift towards compassion. Thank you.
All right. So you will actually see that this actually links back to what both Jude and Rick were talking about, and that'll probably become, and Kristin was singing about, that'll become more apparent as we move on. Now, I gave this particular short presentation about a week ago at the UN to a meeting of committees there, and it's on your form. It's about kind of a report on what's going on with unity movement worldwide. So on October 31st at the Parliament of World Religions in Toronto, which is for us, unity.earth and lots of other people, will be holding a one-day pre-event at the Toronto Cathedral Conference Center called Unifying the Unifiers. And it's actually a meeting of really well-known people, movers and shakers globally, who are working to try to bring things together in this direction toward the world that works for everybody. And there are actually four categories of voices in this discussion, and we're going to be doing a very ambitious publication that frames this conversation. So I want to first start by talking about who those voices are, because that characterizes really who the stakeholders are. So the first is thought leaders. And thought leaders can either be coming from a secular point of view or a sacred point of view. Very often, like Jude said, that's the same information, but it's a different set of metaphors. One that's based on certain assumptions that are secular, the other based on certain assumptions that are sacred. And they tend to look and have visions about the whole enchilada. They want to look at the entire world and where all the spokes of the transformative wheel are going. So the second group is interfaith leaders. Now, interfaith leaders are also addressing, how we can get the world going in this coherent direction, but usually they'll be speaking from their rootedness in one tradition or maybe two or three traditions. And that's absolutely fine, because these actually represent the constituencies that are going to have to come together. Now, the third voice is vision statements from major global organizations that have projected how this might be done. So Global Citizen, Unity Earth, We, Integral, Humanities Team, lots of vision statements from folk that are out there really trying to ask what this coherence is. And then the fourth category is a compilation on what's out there globally now, which I guess we would call internationally vetted universal principles and universal action steps. Because I think, there are many groups out there that have their 8 points, their 12 points, their 10 points, their 7 points. And these are silos right now that aren't necessarily talking to each other. So the first thing I want to say then, given that you're going to have 70 or 80 very, very well-known people there who represent dynamic constituencies, the question, do they agree on anything at this point? And what's interesting is that in the preliminary run-up to making this meeting, the answer is yes. They absolutely do agree. The first thing they agree about, and is interesting because it's almost a cliche, but it's a cliche that won't go away because it's one we haven't solved yet. And that is that there's really three levels, or imagine three concentric spheres, if you want to look at it three-dimensionally, of transformation that have to take place if we're going to get where we want to go globally. So one is that transformation is going to have to take place at the deepest personal level and the level of deepest personal moral capacity. So at the individual level first, everybody gets that. Second level that it has to happen at is the community level, which could be families or groups of coherent friendships and working together relationships, which is a we, but it's a we that has accountability, and it is a we that has responsibility because of the degree of intimacy that's in that we. And that's also, if you know integral and spiral dynamics, so far I've been talking about I and about we, the two of the quadrants of integral theory and spiral dynamics. All right? So the third one then is the tricky one. The third one that it has to take place in is the global or the institution or the world of objectification or this gigantic disjunct that we see in the institutions of the world, governments, dogmas, politics, worldviews, where this parses out and people can't agree. Now, if you look then really at any revolution that's gone on in the last numbers of years, Ukrainian Revolution, Arab Spring, post-Soviet Union, whatever it may be, usually all of these, you get a movement And the personal says yes, and the we says yes. So I and we say yes. They get out there in the street, like in the Arab Spring, and they get something to move. But what usually then happens is that the institutional space, that it space is what Wilbur calls the it space, the institutional space, the conventional one, says no. And then not only says no, but usually retrenches backwards into something either similar to what was wrong before or even worse. So thinking globally, acting locally, thinking locally, acting globally, these are cliches, but we can't get by them. And the reason that we have to address transformation on these three levels actually goes back to what integral spiral dynamics say, is that the way that all human beings from caveman days until now have experienced reality is in those three levels, which are the three persons in all languages. We experience reality in first person, we experience it in second person, and we experience it in third person. And this is universal, and so far, we've really got our act together, like in this room night right now. We've got I going really good, and we got we going really good. But once we go outside this building now to where it is operating still in the institutional conventional world, then we get the pushback to where the disjunct is, all right? So, now the other thing that they agree on is that there are 5 directions that we have to take in order to get where we want to go. And I just want to say what those 5 are and just identify each of them briefly, because they're very dynamic buzzwords. So the first one is waking up. Second one is growing up. The third one is cleaning up. The fourth one is showing up. And the fifth one is linking up. So Ken Wilber came up with the first 2. They've been his mantra for quite a while, waking up and growing up. And then Dustin DePerna, who's another integral writer, added cleaning up and showing up. And then we've been adding on to that linking up. So let me say very briefly in my 3 minutes left what those are. Well, like Ken Wilber says, waking up has been around for millennia. It's what goes on in the personal space. Ever since the Buddha or any other great spiritual leader or teacher, people have individually known what it means to wake up to their divine nature, their full moral capacity, that they're not separate from anything, that they're interconnected with everything, that there is no other, and blah, blah, blah. But growing up has only been possible really in about the last 150 years since the global civilization started to emerge. And what growing up is, as Ken Wilber says, it's realizing that we have to build the world that reflects waking up. That waking up itself is not enough. If we don't build the world around us that reflects that, we're not getting anywhere to the world that will work for everybody. So if you have then waking up and growing up, then it's pretty obvious that in order to get from waking up to growing up, you got to do some cleaning up, right? You got to have reconciliation, you got to have forgiveness, you have to have shadow work. And a huge amount, of course, what Rick's talking about in nonviolent communication is in this whole arena of cleaning up. So that's huge. So if you've done then your cleaning up, then the next thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to show up. Because you're going to have to show up in a way that's activist and pushes this new vision or new worldview, and particularly in this other cliche, but it's a true cliche, is speaking truth to power. You have to wake up and get out there so that you're showing up to make this happen, all right? And then the fifth one's pretty obvious, is that you're not going to show up effectively unless you link up. And that seems to be what's evolving now at a global level, is a dropping of ego, both organizationally and individually, and a deep, deep urgency in people to work together in an amazingly fulfilling space. When you start doing we work and doing it really skillfully, there's immediate payback that comes in the vibration and in what's shared. You recognize it as another level of consciousness, and it's a level of consciousness that is not only moving toward the coherence that Jude talks about, but it's giving you immediate feedback about how that is satisfying to this list of needs that Rick just passed out. When you have that experience, you go, wow, this is inspiring, because it's inherently giving something back. So last 2 quick points. First is the question, why? I'm sure that so many of you, when you do your work, and I know all of you do amazing work, you come back from a conference or a meeting and you say to yourself, why in the hell am I doing this? Because, it's taxing what we all do. But the reason that's obvious is that if in anything that we're doing, we actually are making some little difference in the global perspective, the whole global worldview, from the man on the woman on the street on up, that's worth doing. If we can shift at all the global perspective, just at the level of people on the street, then that's worth doing. And then the last point is this, is the question is what's next? What people actually think is next, and I'll just try to be really brief on this, is that the groups, and think of many of the groups that you're working with, because all of you do, the number of groups that are going to be able to emerge with a lot of social traction, with a lot of traction in civil society, is going to increase. It's interesting, you look at spiral dynamics, it talks about first regional empires, continental empires, and then global empires. And it'll be the same thing, I think, with this type of altruistic work. You're going to get more and more large organizations that truly are influential in where global worldview is going. And that probably, then the other question they'll need to ask, is it possible for them to work together? If they've gotten where they're going by working together with other groups, can a lot of big ones then work together? And I think this is the question that will then emerge, and hopefully evolution will solve it, if our dear Jude here is correct. Let's hope so. So that's my 2 cents, and we'll go back to you all.
Thank you, Kurt. Here's Robert.
Okay, so we want to take the next few minutes to open the floor for some questions, but before we do, I'd just like to ask everyone, when we've completed for the evening, if you could fold your chair. We're going to be placing the chairs outside in the hallway, and you'll see, I'll start, or you would fold your chair against the wall. Thank you. Who has a question? Michelle?
I have a question for Jude. Is there some scientific formula where the number, the mass, a square root, to shift the greater cosmos? Is there something close?
There have been a few attempts at this, and some folks talk about 1%, some folks talk about the square root, etc. The thing I do know is that it's not arithmetic, that when we come together, we are greater than the sum of our parts. So essentially, we find that many relationships throughout nature and throughout influence are geometric, yeah? And they are exponential. So whilst I don't know the exact amount, and I've studied this for over 60 years, and I've heard suggestions of this, I'm not sure I believe anything that I've seen. What I do feel is really important is what Kurt said, this process of waking up, growing up, cleaning up, showing up, and linking up. And, you know, one of the things I know as a healer is that I never heal anyone. But what I can be is in service to someone else's healing. But I also know, and anyone else here who's a healer will know this, you do your best and literally get out of the way. And I think this is what it's about. You know, if we say, oh, it's X%, and we're sort of struggling to get to X%, and then X% is there and it doesn't happen. It's rather like, you know, a cult leader saying on the 17th of February, the saucer's going to come down and we're going off, and the 17th of February comes and passes. No, it'll be the 18th of March. No, it'll be the 17th of June. Yeah. So I just invite us, because one of the things that's so beautiful about linking up, and this is something that the sort of, when I saw the first 4 of those points, I knew something was missing. My heart said there's something missing here. And so we started to have conversations about this linking up. And I'm finding that the acceleration of that and the inspiration of that and the empowerment of that, even over the last few months, has been extraordinary. So my invitation is that we just keep on keeping on. Or as Churchill said, keep on buggering on, but that's rude, so I won't say that.
Anyone else?
Oh, boy. I have a couple of questions. First, just to clarify, first with Kurt, then Jude. If all the I's and all the we's continue to get together and transform, will that then transform all of the it's?
Yeah, yes, if the skill level can be passed on. I mean, if the skill level of understanding what it really is win-win and what it really means to have we be reciprocity, then the answer would be yes. One would assume, now this is interesting, I'm going to go back to Teilhard. Remember Teilhard said that our evolution is a psychic evolution. And so that would mean to me at a certain point, when you start to read Teilhard about the emergence of the global mind, he's talking about this sense of coherence where the it institutions would actually be like a gigantic meta-we. But the reason would be that they've reached a moral capacity, a listening capacity, and that ability to work together that is actually as real as what we see now at the level of we. So hopefully, yes.
I agree with that. I mean, one interesting thing in the UK is that Lord Stoner Blackheath, who hosted the launch of the Cosmic Hologram last year, introduced mindfulness into Parliament and got 150 peers and MPs through that 8-week process and 250 staff, and that's growing. And I think, let's forget that we're not the 99% of the 1% or the us and the them. We're all in this. And so one of the things that we've been doing is realizing that, we've been linking up to create something called the WholeWorld-View community of change makers. And they include CEOs of major corporations, and they include politicians and media folk and change makers of all sorts, of all stripes. So everywhere, and I used to be, a senior businesswoman, there are people who are going through this growing, waking up, growing, in those positions. So one of the things that we've been doing is helping identifying who they may be and helping them to realize that they're not alone. And there are some amazing folks facilitating transformational change at those levels as well. So I think it's all happening. It's like a tide of change that's raising all the boats in it. But I also feel we should not forget, and in fact more than not forget, actively be grateful for all the multidimensional support we have. We are not in this alone.
And just to go to what Rick was saying, what you really would probably find is a grand switch in strategy to a strategy that's actually working for the good of the whole. But that would need to be overwhelming to what the ego now in Homo sapiens still wants to keep holding in separateness.
I think I'll add my 2 cents there too, because what we're talking about, all the I's coming together and becoming a we, it's got to be done consciously so that there is a cultural shift that takes place. You can have all the movements in the world coming out like they did, prior to the Iraq War, where 12 million people around the world in 800 cities said, no, we don't want to go to war. But then it happened anyway. So to have prevention instead of crisis management, prevention is where the culture shifts, so it becomes unthinkable to do things that do not serve the common good, which is we thinking and we consciousness. So I'm just saying that cultural shift is essential in order for us to get to where we want to go.
Thank you. After all the it's are just a bunch of I's and we's anyway. Thank you all. Now, another question I have for you, Jude. Seeing as evolution occurs because of the increase in information, as I understand, correct? In essence. In that case, when there becomes, sounds so funny, a separation between soul and body at the time of what we call death, right? will the information that's been gathered in that body over the course of that lifetime be adding to the intelligence and information and evolutionary life of the soil?
Nice one, Mitchell. Nice one, nice one. Essentially, what is manifest within space-time remains in space-time, or at least on the holographic boundary, and that's really what the ancients call the Akashic record going forward. You know, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, or something similar on a universal level. But our consciousness continues in that sense, in some way. And that's really, and one of the things that I feel is that despite the mysticism of the ages that we've done deep dives into in our life, I feel that humanity as a collective consciousness is now on the threshold of something extraordinary, literally our next step of conscious evolution. And it seems to me that we're rather like, 3-year-olds at the gates of the school, and whatever we've sort of gained in terms of insights and understanding so far we're at that stage. We haven't even discovered writing yet in that sense, let alone joined up writing. There is so much that we have to explore and experience and grow into, that if we as we're all saying, can actually get past this pinch point that perhaps every planetary dominant civilization gets to at some point. And we were talking about this earlier. Some while ago, we were with a group of friends, and we contacted some extraterrestrials, and in an group attunement, and asked the question, how did you survive and thrive? How did you get through this pinch point, a breakdown or potential breakthrough? And the message that came back immediately was we came to understand, experience, and embody unity awareness. So whether we will or not, going back to what you were saying about the percentage, one of the things that happens, though, with complex systems, as you know well, is that when they are unsustainable and begin to break down, there is also the potentiality for a higher level coherent emergence. And something called flickering happens. And it's rather like me trying to give up chocolate biscuits. I have great intentions, so I go to that higher level of coherence for a couple of days, and then I fall back into the old patterns. And I think that's perhaps where we're at. We're actually in this, attractor basin of behavior that's based on our limited perspectives, which is breaking down and is unsustainable. And in that sort of potentiality of non-physical yet, but there is the potential to crystallize a higher level of coherence. And we're doing a bit of that. But if we can do that, that is what emergence is, whether it's biological or consciousness.
Yeah, and, evolution is emergence. And the pattern in nature and also culturally is there's always a bottleneck. If there wasn't a bottleneck, there'd be no pressure to go into that next level of emergence. But the next level of... Exactly. But what that level of emergence may not be known yet. So Julian Jaynes, who studied this a lot, he said that the thing that characterizes the bottleneck period, and boy, this is it right now globally, is immense cognitive dissonance, where no stories seem to work. The old ones don't work, new ones haven't showed up, and it's bipolar. It's exactly what's going on now, is this big dissonance before we're pushed out of the situation of the bottleneck and into what can emerge. If you study the Renaissance, it's amazing that what could have predicted the Renaissance doesn't even seem to have been there. And yet, if you look at like 20 different things that the Renaissance characterized, they all showed up, just kind of like a serendipity at the same time, which allowed something then to emerge. No one could even imagine that those components were there. So, yeah.
Thank you. Move on to the next program.
Okay. So remember before we were saying, think of something, a quote that you may have heard that you didn't like hearing. In other words, someone said something to you that you didn't like hearing. So if you have a piece of blank paper, we're going to try something. And if anyone needs a piece of blank paper, and you'll need a pen or a pencil. Gil, could you, anyone who might need a piece of paper? So basically, while he's handing out some paper, this is called Shifting Towards Compassion, and it was developed by someone named Tom Bond. And Tom Bond is the founder of the New York Center for Nonviolent Communication, and actually he is starting again this Wednesday, June 20th, the Compassion course, which is an online course that goes for 1 year. It's like a weekly kind of message and information each week for a year. And you can find out more about that by going to compassioncourse.org. And he developed this to see if people can have a shift in their own lives, if they're experiencing some kind of upset with something that happened where someone said something that they were not happy hearing. So to begin, you can imagine a continuum, and we call it the connection continuum. So on one side of the continuum, you have rage, disconnection, violence, and on the other side, you have connection, compassion, and peace. And if you think about it, in all our interactions with other people and actually with ourselves, we're moving back and forth, minute to minute, and sometimes second to second, in that continuum of connection, you know, where you feel connected or disconnected from people you're with, and actually sometimes with yourself. So what we're going to do now is see if we can consciously move in the direction towards compassion. So on the top of the page, write down the quote, or you can boil it down to like one sentence or something, could be a phrase, whatever that was that someone said to you that you did not like hearing. And just write that just at the very top, and we're going to use most of the rest of the page for some other things. Yeah, it's something that, I mean, it's probably best if someone said something to you directly that you didn't like hearing, and it could be anything. And by the way, I would recommend not taking something that made you extremely upset, right? Because like, we're trying this for the first time, right? So it's like, you don't want, if you're just learning skiing, you don't want to go down the side of a mountain on the very first time you put skis on, right? So if someone came up to you, if a person in your life came up to you and said, "I'm not really your father," that's not what we want to experiment with here tonight. That's a little bit extreme, right? Or, "I am your father." That could also be extreme. That's right. So just see if you can find something mildly upsetting and write that at the top of the page. Okay, so now draw under that quote a line from left to right, the entire across the page. And on the, so you're kind of, and you're drawing this, draw a line now in the center of the page, but just going down halfway, because we're going to leave a blank space at the bottom half of the page. But in the top half of the blank space, under the quote, draw a vertical line in the center. And in the left column, the top of the left side, put an F. An F for feelings. And what we're going to do is and by the way, we're going to use the sheets, the feelings sheets for this. So write down the feeling that you had, or feelings that you had when that person said that quote to you. And, you know, if you can't think of a quote from the recent past, it could be from, more in the past. So, yes, what was your feeling or feelings when you think about that quote? So it could be in the present, like when you're thinking about that quote, how do you feel right now? But use the feelings on the sheet. And the reason for that is those feelings are carefully designed to eliminate other complications like judgments. You know, like, I felt he was an idiot or something like that. That's not one of the universal underlying feelings, right? So for the purposes of what we're doing now, please just use the feelings that are listed there, okay? So now, yeah, that's okay. So you can put all of those feelings that even if one led to another feeling, but put them down, yeah. Yeah. And it can be a few. It doesn't have to be like 20 of them or, you know, and probably more than one, you know, just like 3 or 4 or something that kind of represent how you were feeling when you think about that quote. Okay, so now going to the next column, the top of that, put an N at the top of the right column. And that is going to be for needs. And here, write down what you were needing at that moment when you heard that quote and not getting when you heard that quote. What were you needing and not getting when you heard that quote? And again, please use the list of the needs there. And you'll notice, if you look at the list, there's nothing on that list of needs that says car or job or money, right? Or husband or girlfriend or power or control. Those are not underlying needs. In fact, those are strategies. Remember, we were saying it's the strategies to meet people's needs that can come into conflict. But so we're talking about the underlying needs. And here, what need or needs were not being met when you heard that quote? Okay. So after you write that, right. So yeah, you take a couple of minutes. And in fact, after you've finished writing down a few of the feelings and a few of the needs, take a moment. You could even close your eyes, relax, let it kind of seep in, what we're talking about. And then look again at those 2 columns, your feelings and your needs that you wrote down, and see if you want to make any changes or add anything, or are you complete with that kind of look at yourself at that moment when you heard that quote that you didn't like hearing. Okay? So when you're done with that, put a line, draw a line across the entire page, left to right, under your feelings column and your needs column. And now for the bottom half of the page, do another vertical line, and at the top of the left column of the bottom half of the page, put an F, and at the top of the right column, put an N. And one thing I want to mention, this particular exercise that we're doing is actually called the exercise. And you can do this anytime you want at home. And in fact, it improves with practice, you know. Like for people who are just trying this the first time, it might be a little strange or whatever. But you can try it. I mean, some people do this all the time, many times a day, when things are happening. And you can actually find this online at theexercise.org. I kid you not. So you can try this anytime you want. Theexercise.org. And again, it's developed by Tom Bond and the New York Center for Nonviolent Communication. Okay, so we're at the bottom half, right? At the top of, or under the F that you wrote, write down the feeling that you imagine the other person was feeling at that moment when they said that quote that you didn't like hearing. What do you think they might have been feeling at that moment? Now, if you can't imagine what they might have been feeling, it's possible that you're not yet complete with your list that you did at the top. The feeling, your own feelings and needs when they said that. Sometimes that happens. If you just can't picture what that person might have been feeling, you might want to go back and see if there's anything that you want to add to those lists that you had up.
What they were feeling when they said it.
What's that?
What they were feeling when they said it.
Yes, we're talking about what they were feeling when they said what they said. Okay, and then, of course, we're going to go, after you imagine those feelings, we're going to go to the right side and put, where you have the N, and what do you think they were needing and not getting when they said what they said? So, it's really key in order to understand or put yourself in the shoes of the other person. It is really important and key for you to be able to understand what is going on inside yourself. That's why if you find it hard to imagine what they might be feeling or what they might have been feeling and might have been not getting enough of, like needing, it's really important to feel complete with how you the list of feelings and needs that you wrote for yourself. And if you are pretty complete with that, it makes it much easier to kind of guess what the feelings and needs might have been from that person when they said what they said. Okay, so again, take a moment, close your eyes, relax, let it kind of seep in, the whole thing, right? So now, check with yourself and see if you notice a difference in how you were thinking about that situation, about that person, what happened. Do you notice a shift in how you're feeling about it? Just how you've been thinking about it? And if so, you may have experienced what we're talking about, making a small shift towards compassion. Now, not everybody is going to feel that shift, right? Especially since we're kind of doing it quickly, you know, and like I said, sometimes it takes more, you know. You can go home and think about the same situation, same incident, let's say, and try it again later, and you may experience a shift if you're not experiencing it now. Some people might not experience it. Now, the other thing is, if you happen to pick something that was very upsetting, like, yes, I am your father, and you've been denying it for all these years, you might not experience that shift at this moment. Yeah. It could be. Well, this is the thing. So, you know, you're off mic. So, what you're saying is you had a different way of thinking about it than you had all this time. And therefore, that is a shift. And we call that a shift towards compassion. Because if you have greater understanding about what's going on, and it can actually reduce your level of stress if you have even a little shift. So, I guess before I finish, I want to mention again that that this is like a tiny little taste of what NVC is, right? So there's a much larger body of work that nonviolent communication has, and today, June 18th, is actually 2 days before the online compassion course starts. So later, or if anybody's interested, I have some information about that, so I can hand that out later. But so thank you. I hope you've had a very interesting time with shifting towards compassion. We do have some other things that we're going to be doing, but there will be a time to share in groups and then with the whole also. Be careful.
Oh, should I do it now? Okay. I'll do whatever I'm told. Jude, so thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your deep investigation of nature and of consciousness. What I wanted to offer are some comments and then a question. You may know this already, I feel like you do, but in the Jewish mystical tradition, in the Kabbalah, there's this very profound and subtle concept which is harmonious with what I'm hearing. I haven't read your book yet, so maybe this isn't there, but this concept of co-creating. And part of the purpose of creation is to allow humans to co-create with the Creator, understood in the Kabbalistic tradition as not exactly the opposite of a, angry man with a beard. And fashion, by humans raising their consciousness, the consciousness of the universe or the multiverse is moving in that direction of self-reflection, of literally, by humans doing this work, this spiritual work, it's serving as the mirror whereby the divine is able to say, aha, or I am. Switching now to a different tradition, which I've been studying for about 25 years from India. I've been investigating yogic traditions and particularly tantric traditions. There's this concept that as awareness increases its understanding and its perception of itself, that not just that it's a singularity or a oneness, it's also that the awareness itself, the divine awareness, becomes aware of its multiplicity, which I think is very much in line with your understanding of entropy. Your understanding of entropy helped me understand that connection on a much deeper level in terms of physics. So thank you so much. It's this concept that the goddess always has more. That there's no stasis into in the process of unity, awareness, becoming aware of its unity. There's always more. There's always more information to understand or to arise from the void or from emptiness. Those are just my comments. My question is, how does dark matter fit within your model? Because as I'm sure you know, dark matter there's increasing empirical confirmation and understanding of dark matter playing a role in our cosmology and astrophysics. So just in a nutshell, where does curious as dark matter, I think, throws all sorts of curves and additional layers of subtlety and multiplicity in understanding this unity consciousness. Dark matter is saying, wait a minute, the information may be trapped, or maybe different things going on in information that are just so complex. So I'll pause there and I'll let you offer your reflections on dark matter. Thank you so much.
So when you answer, why don't you go into the attunement that you were thinking?
Thanks. Just briefly to answer, because we are going to go into attunement, but first of all, thank you for raising the Kabbalah. I have a very good friend who's a very, very profound Kabbalah scholar, and that level of becoming and that emergent, co-creative impulse is one that I agree completely shares the perspective with the cosmic hologram. And I think, going back to what I was saying earlier, this is science catching up with universal spiritual traditions and integrating and transcending into a whole new level of integrative perspective. So thank you. I think in terms of dark matter, the jury is a bit out. I mean, one of the things I write about in the book is that the leading possibility for dark matter, I mean, the thing with dark matter is it's matter that's just not visible. The reason it's dark is, A, it's not visible, and it doesn't interact with what we call visible energy and matter, in other words, all of this, other than through gravity. But what it does do is it's actually the scaffolding for the visible energy and matter of our universe. So at the moment, there's no real evidence that it's other than a physicalized component of energy matter, but it is a scaffolding. So my own sense is, however speculative this is, that it will form part of a bridge of consciousness expressing itself in this way. At the moment, though, that is maybe a little way away, but I do think it's very important. And when you think of dark matter and dark energy, which is this tension within space-time, which of course is crucial to enable that informationally entropic process to happen, they actually make up 96% of what we call, the energy matter of our universe. So the visible energy matter is only about 4%. So I think they have great lessons to learn. I think we've got some evidence, but I think we've got a lot way to go. But I agree with you. I think that both of them are vital in understanding how consciousness expresses itself as physicalized reality. Does that help? Thank you. Thank you. And as Rick suggests, we're now going to go into an attunement. And I call it a universal heart attunement because at this amazing time, my sense is that we are expanding, you know, this waking up and growing up. We're expanding our awareness beyond the personalized sense of self. We are moving from the we and the all. Oh, maybe a little less. Yeah, one or all. It does. Well, let's do... Yeah, absolutely. So many years ago, I got a download that said the bridge between the personal self and this expanded transcendental sense of self is what I call the universal heart or the eighth chakra. Some people call it the higher heart. Some people call it the one heart. But it's generally energetically felt between the personal heart and the throat chakra. So I'm going to invite us to move into that space of unity, that space of compassion. It's a light show. It's all a light show. It's all a light show. It's all a light show. That's nice. Thank you, Robert. That's great. Thanks, everyone. So if we just perhaps sit with our backs really feeling supported in our chairs and our feet, perhaps our legs uncrossed and our feet feeling balanced on the floor. And just to begin by closing our eyes. And as the ancients taught us to do, to focus on our breath. So as you breathe out, have a sense of breathing out any concerns, any worries, any stress. You may feel that your shoulders just slump as you breathe out. And then, as you breathe in, sense that you're replacing that stress, that worry, that concern with a new beginning, a gentleness, a sense of peace. And just allow your breath to flow that sense of peace and gentleness through you to all parts of you. And then continue in the cycles of your breath as you breathe out to just gently release anything that feels stressful. You may just feel into where in your body that stress may reside, that concern may reside, that tension may reside. But use your breath to just gently dissolve it and release it through your out-breath. And then as you breathe in, replace that stress with a sense of peace, and quietude and joy. So use the cycles of your breath, the release and the renewal, to take you, to guide you, to invite you deeper and deeper within, to that place of peace, that place of knowingness of unity, that place of quiet joy, that place of deep love at the very core of your being. And now gently bring your attention, your awareness, to a place midway between your heart and your throat. And if it helps to emphasize that focus, you may feel that you want to place your hands over that point that I call the universal heart of the eighth chakra. And now as you breathe in, sense that you're breathing in a thread of light into this place. And as you do, with each in-breath, a tiny sphere is beginning to form there. A sphere of light that grows and brightens with each breath until it grows to be a perfect size that you just know is right for you in this moment. So just spend a few moments with your breath,
creating a beautiful sphere of light essence that's centered in the universal heart. And as it grows in its perfection, naturally and easily, sense its essence of love. A love that knows you, all that you are and have ever been and will be. And a love that sees you, all that you are, without judgment, with compassion. And just feel that love within you, nurturing you, holding you safe. And now as you breathe in, breathe your awareness down through the universal heart, this beautiful sphere of love essence, down through your body and between and beneath your feet, and on and down into the welcoming embrace of Mother Earth, of our beloved Gaia. And continue to allow your awareness to continue down into her embrace like the taproot of a great tree, further and further down through all her dimensions and realms, until you feel or sense the welcome of her heart at the core of her being, inviting you home. And as your awareness reaches that beautiful homecoming, sense that her essence combines with yours. And as you then continue your breath, that awareness, hers and yours together, now flows up from her heart all the way up through her dimensions and realms, on and up through this great taproot of connection you've made together, on and up through your body and on and up through the universal heart, and on and up to the highest realms of spirit. And then a returning pulse of unconditional love from those highest realms of being down through you, down through the universal heart, and on and down once again to join with the heart of Gaia. So now gently pulse this connection between the heart of Gaia, between her and you and the highest realms of spirit. Gently and easily, a pulse of unconditional love connecting you, easily and effortlessly. And as you do so, allow that pulse to gently soften and fade away, because now the connection is strong. And come to center your awareness within the universal heart. And now as you do, breathe into the universal heart and sense your awareness expanding in a great sphere of consciousness, your awareness expanding beyond your body, expanding beyond this room, expanding beyond all limitations of space and time, as you remember the oneness of all that you are, the oneness of all that is, and the oneness of love. And in that immeasurable love, in that divine love, in that eternal love, in that infinite love, spend a few moments being in a place that truly has no boundaries, in a time that is only this moment, and that all there is love. And in the oneness of love, now gently bring your awareness back to center within your universal heart. Remembering the uniqueness of the me and the amazing diversity of the we and the wholeness of the all. And in that precious awareness, in that remembering, when you feel ready, gently open your eyes and return to this room, and perhaps when you are ready to open your eyes, look around you and just have a sense, perhaps, of seeing with new eyes and seeing now with the wisdom of the heart. And when you do come back, I'd really appreciate you smiling at me. Say it knows you're back and be I like it, so thank you everyone.
If you would just kind of stay in that space, because we'd like to invite you, now that you're in that beautiful space, to reflect a bit on how unity and that awareness is embodied in you individually, communally, globally. So just stay in that space and see that unity, how it manifests in your life. Most likely through compassion, which has been eloquently talked about tonight. Or perhaps where it's incomplete, and perhaps where unity could be used or could be better shared. Just quietly reflect on that for a few moments. Writing can be helpful. You have paper. I've given you some cards that also talk about the unity. You can write on your cards if that's helpful. And when you're ready, we're going to invite you to share with your neighbors or who you feel drawn to in groups of 2 or 3. And so as you're ready, please form your groups, look at your neighbors, and please share a few minutes. And we'll do this for about 5 or 6 minutes.
Well, that's what we've done. We like the three spheres. Yeah, well, yeah, if you look at what it does, and that's real simple. I talked to Ken Wilber about that. Because if he was going to put it on paper, which is a two-dimensional space, then he had to take the three, and what he found out is when you project it in two-dimensional space as four quadrants, then you can see the relationship of singular, plural, and other. So there are different, it's like you said, depending on how you arrange things, permutations of the information are interesting. So you see certain things when you do it spheres or spirals, and then you see certain things when you do it clockwise. Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I mean, that's yeah, and I think one of them just bounces off of them. Like the oral Indian people have a great definition of feminine male, which I like. He said femininity leads men. So it's really into the detail, into the exactly. The masculinity leads back. He wants to see the big picture or objectify patterns. And so it's kind of a zoetrope of that. Those two. Yeah, you get the third that emerges from the dialectic. So you got the painting, the observer of the painting, and then the experience of the painting. And so now what you find out in neuroscience about the mirror neuron is that the mirror neurons are exactly in like all organisms. So and particularly understanding things like dog and human relationships, the mirror neurons are really powerful. So dogs get pointy, and they identify as our best friend. Isn't that interesting? And vice versa. Yeah, I think when we started the mirror all along, so one thing came over is that the way the mirror neurons are also different than every one of those levels. That's what's fabulous about it. It's fabulously wonderfully complex. Yeah. Well, again, he talks about the zones within every quadrant. So within the first quadrant, which is the eye, there's only one degree eye, and zone 2 is the So it's again, it's any object of location. What he calls zone 2. So there's always the unchecked internal perspective. That's what he calls zone 1. And then there's the corroborated and adjudicated, where you got more input in zone 2. And that's true, again, it's operating at every level. So there's a zone 2, good example, spirituality is a zone 1 experience, psychology is a zone 2 experience, but the same thing, whether it's a 3D experience. And so that's really the elements of it. One question. Yeah, well, we had been saying joining it, and then we modified it. That bringing up joining up some arbitrary. We can do it out. Just like with all of them, I'm sure Ken Wilber's like the first person that thought of what part of the universe is now, all of this stuff.
We'll take 2 more minutes, please. 2 2 more minutes.
I chose a kind of journey piece, and would you like to do like a brief
So if you start to wrap up, please.
poetic thing in the beginning for a couple minutes, and then I'll start coming in like we did last time. We can see what happens. See where we go. But I'm thinking you could do like a spoken word, just free flow, and then when it feels right, I'll start singing, and then yeah, and then just yeah. So like, but feel free to take like 2. I mean, it's like 7.5 minutes or something like that. So you can take a couple minutes, take a few minutes. Yeah, just feel it. It'll be natural.
In his younger days, he was...
Which is what I know, and I stopped.
One announcement would be if you happen.
So everyone, as you've heard tonight as well, a big part of this is linking up. And of course, the wisdom and joy for each person. When you're ready. So much of the value is always, and the intelligence, of course, is in the group, always. And
Yes.
Linking up is a big part. So please, leave tonight with numbers, with emails, with cards, how we support each other to really embody unity on particularly the communal and global is key. And so that, to give us a lovely closing, I'd like to give it back to Jude and Kristin.
So we're going to do a bit of a free flow worldview soul jam and see what happens. We're all co-creating this as we speak. So, no, I think it's good. We like you in the middle.
We're good. We love you sitting there. It's wonderful.
So tell me whenever you're ready. Or do you want to say something before?
No, I'm ready.
Oh, you're
to
ready.
go.
Oh, I love it when you're just ready to jump in. We'll see what happens. I'm sure it'll be exactly what it needs to be.
A tiny seed point began a long, long time ago. Cosmic mind, infinite, eternal, began a thought. What if? What if? From that seed grew over millions, billions of years. Stars, galaxies, planets. A planet was born in a solar system, fathered by a great sun, mothered by a caring moon. A planet so rich she could nurture biology, biological life. The first cells, the first simple beings grew and prospered and died and changed and evolved. Thousands upon thousands of years, aeons passed. The tree of life grew. The tree of life prospered. The tree of life became abundant. The tree of life nurtured other life. And so it goes. That seed has become a tree. What if? What will that tree evolve into? What will we evolve into? What will life, the evolutionary impulse of life, all life, evolve into?
life, light, love.
As we hope we've been able to show you and help you see, experience, and feel, the whole world view is emerging through us, individually, communally, and globally. And that was our hope tonight. We hope you've enjoyed it. Part of the exercise, and particularly for all of us, is to share it and finding the words. And tonight what we've tried to show is how the spiritual arts are emerging. And one of the ways that it is being embodied is through spiritual art in many forms. And so with that, I'd like to share a few announcements with you. On July 15th, there will be a day of social artistry. And as way showers and change agents, we're finding that social artistry is a great way to communicate that. Through the expression and development of the spiritual arts. We've had the great joy the last year of being welcomed into the United Palace, known for decades as the House of Inspiration, and becoming a house of cultural arts. It's way up in Washington Heights. It's the largest theater on Broadway in a gorgeous building if you don't know it. Jude will be there on July 15th, together with Lynn McTaggart and Jean Houston, Dwayne Elgin, who else is there? Jose Miguel, Roman, Monica Sharma, Heather Shea, and music by Anwar Robinson. And what will they explore there is a state-of-the-art training calling people to become social artists. And for us, and for them, a social artist is a leader who utilizes the dedication, skills, and understanding of an artist and applies them to people and societies. And that's, for us, a wonderful expression of the whole world view. Also for tonight, they do have costs, of course. We've had to rent the room tonight. I want to express our great gratitude to Al for live streaming and all the people out there. Thank you for that. Of course, for Kristin for the strength to lug your equipment on your back across and through the city. For Rick for making so easy to make this happen and organizing all of us from near and far, and a beautiful contribution. And I think you can tell us about your course, the Nonviolent course, Communication, coming up. Joya, bless you and thank you for being at the door. If you haven't made a contribution to help us cover the cost of tonight for all this joy and magic, please see Joya. She does accept jewels too. Joyas are welcome, right? Thank you, Kurt, for trekking down from way up. Have I forgotten anyone, Jude? Robert. Oh, there you are, Robert. See, I got to put my glasses back on. And yes, and Robert, thank you for also. We've been Zooming, all of us, trying to make it, and you two here on the ground have made it so much easier and beautiful. So thank you.
Well, I urge you all and people looking in on live stream to connect with all of us. We all have organizations and websites, and mine is we.net for We the World. And as Gil mentioned, the Compassion course is starting in 2 days. I think registration is closing tomorrow. So I have, for people in the room, I have some flyers so I can pass that out. In fact, here, why don't you, for anyone who might be interested in that. And do you want to say your website?
Not really, because I always forget it. www.WholeWorld-View.org. Yay!
And where we really post most of our movings and shakings and happenings is on the same Facebook page, the same name, facebook.com/WholeWorld-View, WholeWorld-View. If you've enjoyed some of Jude's talks, we also have a YouTube channel, WholeWorld-View net YouTube channel. There were a number of videos there. We had a great interview with Deepak while we were here this weekend on Friday. He was so impressed with her science, because he sees a lot of this, that he gave it a full half-hour interview. It's a great little interview. So you can see that on Deepak's Facebook and ours. Yeah.
That's it.
And since I heard that word yoga tonight more than once, so the United Nations Committee for the International Day of Yoga, which is June 21st, and Unity Earth's magazine, Light on Light, we just put out a 100-page digital e-zine on everything that's going on in yoga around the world. It's amazing. Just slip me your email so I can send you the link. It's free. It's on digital platform. And what I love about it is not only the yoga, but what's in there about global social service by yoga communities worldwide is just amazing. And there's then a 90-minute companion broadcast with that, also free, on Voice America, on our Convergence program on Voice America. So very inspiring, and many, many people that you've heard of, all household words.
And I put the link to that yoga. If you don't get to the email, that edition of your magazine is on the Whole Worldview Facebook page as well.
Oh, well, I have a mic on.
Oh, yeah, good. Oh, that's right.
But I don't really have much to say except for thank you so much for being here. And it's in gathering like this that we truly live what we're speaking, right? Live the whole worldview and become the we more and more each time. So thank you.
And you know, we're going to be live streaming for another 20 minutes or so. So after we kind of break up as a group, we can continue some questions, some personal discussions, and that can be shared with people who are tuning in as well. And do you want to say your website?
Oh, sure, I forgot. My website is KristinHoffmann.com, and I'll spell it because it seems to never be right. It's KristinHoffmann. So there's 2 N's at the end, .com. Thank you.
Yeah, let's applaud Kristin's father. Good job.
His birthday's on June 21st. He has a solstice birthday. And his birthday's on the solstice.
Okay. I wanted to thank you all for being here today. This is exactly the spirit of integral yoga. And for anyone who's come here today, please come and visit our classes, our workshop, our meditations. And if I can also share, a lot of the themes we touched on tonight, I've touched in my poetry. So I have put out a book that touches on spirit, society, the individual. It's called Without Knowing Where We Are Going. And I hope you get a chance to check it out. It is on Amazon. So I know I've had some great support from Kurt, Mitchell, and Rick, and I hope if you do get a chance to look at it, you will get much out of it. Thank you.
We can continue to talk, have questions. I mean, we could continue. We have 15 more minutes. Who would like to, and why don't you, whoever has a question, come up. If you're okay with being on camera.
Hi. You touched on this. This is for Jude. Thank you all. This has been so great and terrific. You touched on the multidimensionality of the cosmos and your communication with other beings. As far as my communication goes, I have communication too, but I do it through my third eye going in, and don't think I'm strange. Well, no one here does. Anyway, but I've had many messages and experiences with different planetary systems and specific messages, and I tell my family and close people on our board, but I was wondering if there's any scientific way of proving this so that we get into the newspapers and the media so that it gets out more quickly to help people evolve. Thank you.
I feel this is really important. My sense is that many of us have these experiences. For me, from the age of 4 and ongoing, and it's a daily, it's part of who I am, it's part of my life. One of the things we've been saying as part of the Whole World View is that let's share our stories. Because the more we're willing to share our stories without fear, the more other people feel safe in sharing their stories. And certainly the polls I've seen across the world say that probably a majority of people have had these experiences of engagement with other realms, of telepathic experiences, remote viewing, whatever it may be. So these supernormal phenomena are not supernatural, and they're not paranormal, they're just supernormal. So one of the hopes I have is that as we heal our worldview, we actually naturally are open more to having these engagements with other realms and, with Gaia and with all her children. And to naturalize these and to realize how incredibly nurturing and supportive and inspiring and benevolent they are. When you ask about scientific proof, there's an enormous amount of evidence of supernormal phenomena like telepathy, remote viewing, precognition, etc. And the thing is, the difficulty has been that, mainstream scientists have raised the bar so high for these, and yet they've raised the bar far higher than they would, for example, for drug testing or for, anything other that's mainstream, any social studies or placebos or whatever. They've raised the bar for the acceptance of supernormal phenomena way, way over what is appropriate. And yet, when we look at the meta-analyses of thousands on thousands of cases, it's very clear that something substantial and tangible and real is going on. My sense is as we heal our worldview, we'll open the door to that sharing. But the more any of us who's willing to sort of go out and step out and say, look, this is my story. I'm not trying to prove it to you. I'm not trying to scientifically prove it. I'm just sharing it. But in my experience, the resonance and the response to that is overwhelmingly positive. Yeah.
Yeah, what's really caused a breakthrough is what's going on in neuroscience and neuroscience data sets. And what's great about that is you got a whole new crop of young PhDs who grew up with a lot more breadth to their worldview. They're out to make themselves famous, and they're creating incredible data sets about what the neural networks are for non-dual states and the states in which telepathic and other so-called spiritual gifts or cities show up. So even if you're a secular scientist who is not going to agree with a sacred interpretation of these, you can't deny that there's reproducible and consistent data sets in the neuroscience that shows that all brains are working in the same way when it comes to these phenomena. Another good example is if you Google acoustic archaeology, it's amazing. This is a field now based, we have friends who were kicked out of mainstream universities in the last couple, let's say 3 decades ago, they were the pioneers in this, and they were laughed out of academia. And now there's a whole new field, because what they've discovered, they've gone into sacred places and they've measured the brainwave things that go on there and the acoustic things that go on there, and shown absolutely, no doubt, those induce non-dual states, because they can see where the non-dual states are in the neural data. Boom, they can prove scientifically that these ancient places serve the purpose of inducing these high consciousness states. Now, That's huge, because the same thing has happened in mindfulness. Mindfulness now is really big in the secular community because there's no denying not only the neuroscience data on it, but the emergent data on behavior and wellness and well-being that comes from it. So little by little by little. And then it's very interesting. I'll just spend another moment on this. At the Parliament of World Religions in 2004, there's discussion there of a lot of people about what it would take for mainstream scientists, once they got to this point of seeing these data sets, to really be able to be in our discussion, where they could understand and acknowledge what's going on at these deeper levels. And what everyone agreed is that these people need to have their own experience. And once they have their own experience, then they have to factor that into their worldview. There's a very famous guy, Federico Fagin, who invented the microprocessor. He's very famous. He's working now on the mathematics of a universe that we based on, that it's all about consciousness, that it's not based on material. Now, the only reason he's doing that is because he has had personal non-dual experiences that convinced him, as Jude said, that conventional science has it just upside down. And then he feels a responsibility to take his money and his brains, he's brilliant, and start doing the science that would show what this would look like. So little by little by little, and it's exciting. You know, so.
Well, you know, when we talk about paradigm shifts, Thomas Kuhn was the first to coin that word, and he described paradigm shifts progressing by funerals. We don't really have time for that. But I do really feel that, I think what you said is key. It's experience, it's direct experience. Eben Alexander, who some of you may know is a best-selling author, was a neurosurgeon, and he tells the stories of so many patients of his having near-death experiences, and they'd come to him and said, I've had a near-death experience, and he'd tap them on the shoulder and say, dear, you know, go away and lie down again, until he had his own. And then suddenly he realized that this was a real phenomenon, and it completely turned him around. So I think you're absolutely right. Direct experience so often is the portal to be open to these possibilities. And the more we can share our own experiences, the more that it encourages others, A, to share their own, but also be willing to actually enter into the possibility of those.
But actually, it's before the Nonviolent. It's even before them. But it's amazing now that it's completely now enfranchised in the mainstream because of this new crop of people who put the data sets together. That's how continental drift. Continental drift was completely denied by biology, and then it could not be denied when it was proved by geophysics. So the minute the proof was there in geophysics, the whole biological community was the whole establishment of Harvard that was completely against continental drift. They caved in within a week once the data was there from another field. So that's kind of how it works.
Why don't you say who you are?
Yeah, I should introduce myself. I'm Owen, and I'm from Australia. So I got here via a friend in Florida who I was doing a climate change project with, working with some people in theatre around that. I'm a physical therapist by background and involved in contemporary dance theatre. I'm also a Baha'i member of the Baha'i faith for about 35 years, so very close, unity's very close to my work and my heart. And I think the work, what I've seen through that work, and something that I came across recently, a philosopher, a living philosopher, Douglas Hofstadter, has a theory about identity, and he basically suggests that we are our intimate conversations. So not ourselves as a kind of an identity, but our network of intimate conversations. And I think what I've seen in the work with the Baha'i faith and this sort of concept is that each individual one of us have kind of a great power. I think someone, did you mention power in the beginning or something about, you know, which is not the power of forcing people to do things, but the power of being in a conversation in a certain way.
Power over versus power with.
Power with, yeah. So, I mean, it's a kind of a power almost that a parent has with a child. You know, that's a very particular power. But as all of us parents know, that the power comes from a kind of way you have a conversation with a child, you know. And so we can have a kind of conversation with anybody we meet. And because, you know, and this it creates a distinction between mass psychology, which you referred to like the Arab Spring, and transformative education. So the transformative education that comes through our, you know, conversations are really with intimates, and therefore bringing people into our intimate circle to be in that conversation is quite different from, you know, what mass media is intended to do and what mass politics is intended to do, which usually kind of ends up in destruction. So, you know, we've got a lot of... so apart from all the kind of esoteric things, I think the work is with us in that real sense of reaching out, you know. And somebody recently told me, or asked the question, really, how do you sometimes cross the bridge when you want to have a conversation with someone or some group of people that seem to be standing on the other side of some bridge? Maybe some of those bridges are imaginary, but, you know, we've still got to deal with that. And I think that's very... but it gives us a very real way of acting in the world, and from these points of view, I think. So anyhow, it was kind of a comment, but anything you want to jump in on that would be great. Yeah.
Thank you. That was great. I mean, one of the things that we're, I think, all feeling is that this is a shift of head that actually is about head, heart, and hands. You know, we talk about thinking cosmic, feeling global, acting local. And in that sense, it's bringing the me and the we and the all very much into a lived embodiment of this. And it does begin, as you absolutely say, it begins from within, and it begins very much as a relational exploration. And this is why, you know, we're talking about linking up, because linking up is so vital. And it feels that the acceleration of that linking up is really a very powerful, you know, a vital part of this tidal shift.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, 2 minutes. We have 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Oh. You're just waving at us.
1 2-minute question.
Okay. Would anyone else like to make a point or ask a question? Yes. Excellent.
Yeah.
2 minutes to go.
Thank you. Stand over here. Thank you all so much. You mentioned the spiritual arts, and I just had a question as I'm striving to create unity consciousness through screenwriting, which is a medium that involves, you know, concepts of stories that are fear-based, and, you know, what makes a good story, want and fear and shame. And I just wondered if you had anything to say about how to kind of penetrate these old modalities with consciousness, how to create consciousness in these systems that are really based on, you know, old duality. So, thank you.
Thank you. That's absolutely brilliant. And you know, you're such a great exemplar of spiritual arts, as is Kristin. The reason we're using this term is from our relationship with the United Palace House of Inspiration, because this is an amazing facility in Washington Heights. It's very much a community-based hub, but it has world-class technology. It has amazing new team of people who are coming from unity and diversity, and it's a place of live performance, dynamic performance, community performance, global performance, linking up potentially on this level. And what I'd like to do after this evening is I'd like to suggest to Heather Shea, who is the CEO there, that they perhaps offer some workshops for people who are really wanting to take forward their own involvement in spiritually based art, unity-based arts. And I don't know what will come of it, but through Rick and through Kurt and through the other networking maestros in this amazing place, you'll be able to hear of it, I hope. But that would be something we'd love to take forward.
I have an idea. Have you read the Celestine Prophecy? So I would recommend that, because it's about a person's journey in that regard. And so I would imagine doing a screenplay, you could follow a person's journey and from fear to fear-based thinking to unity consciousness thinking.
And you might want to Google Barnett Bain.
And I think we're about to end if we have not already ended. So thank you to all of the people watching this on live stream. Thank you so much.